the reversal of what he had tried to do. He supported Putin at first. He thought Putin, could be, a successful monarch. Hated, but over time, I think Gorbachev came to realize that Putin was the antithesis of everything that Gorbachev, had tried to do for his country, starting in the 1980s.
David, in '89, when the communist system crumbled around the world and Gorbachev was given the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990, there was the old line that Gorbachev could have won a presidential election in any country in the world except in Russia, which raises the question, how do Russians today feel about him? What is his legacy? We know how Vladimir Putin and his allies feel as they try to undo what they believe to be the damage that Gorbachev did. Right now, we're watching it in Ukraine. But what is the general sentiment nationally in Russia about Gorbachev?
Well, it ranges from a tiny number of people admiring him to a broad number of people being indifferent to him, because after all, 30 years has passed, to a large number of people who loathe him. After all, the people in Russia and elsewhere live inside a kind of propaganda silo or vacuum, and they've been hearing from Putin how terrible that period was. And implicitly and sometimes explicitly, that Gorbachev triggered what Putin calls the greatest tragedy in geopolitical history, certainly of the 20th century, and that is to say the collapse of the Soviet Union, which Gorbachev did not want. Gorbachev wanted to keep the Union together in some way.
Editor of The New Yorker, David Remnick, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Now to a few other stories making headlines around the world. More than 1,000 people, including over 350 children, have been killed this year by monsoon rains and flooding in Pakistan. The Pakistani army is helping with relief and rescue operations as the government pleads for international aid. More than 1 million homes have been destroyed and more than 500,000 people are in displacement camps. Pakistan typically sees 3 or 4 rain cycles during the monsoon season. So far this year, it has seen 8. The U.S. says it will provide $30 million in humanitarian assistance. At least 33 million people have been affected by the flooding. Willie?
Back here at home, Jackson, Mississippi remains in a state of emergency this morning. The city's water system has been shut down due to that massive flooding, leaving 200,000 people without clean water. But it's not a new problem in Jackson. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas has the latest.
This morning in Jackson, Mississippi, residents are already lining up for limited supplies of water. The governor declaring a new state of emergency, calling in the National Guard to help distribute water to 180,000 people.
This is not a situation that's going to be solved immediately.
You may be asking, okay, between this event that hit in Dallas, then it rolled on over the southern plains and hit over in Jackson, Mississippi, which they got flooded in 2020. That was even worse than the one today. But what we're seeing is these deluges that continue to keep bombarding various parts of the country. And it's basically where God has lifted his hand off of society to the degree that now our atmosphere has become so hot that it holds more moisture. The moisture goes up higher. And then whenever it does release the moisture, it releases it all at one time. This is all the signs of global warming, atmospheric crisisness that is only going to intensify and get worse and worse until we can pre-manage and until we can go back to the cross, as it talks about there in the first part of Revelations, and do our first works over again. Until we're willing to do that in a grand movement towards a revival, resorting into a revolution, we're just going to continue to see problem after problem after problem. I mean, last year they got like 17 inches of rain in 6 hours in Waverly, Tennessee. We've seen eastern Kentucky flooded. We've seen southern Illinois flooded. We've seen St. Louis and east of St. Louis flooded, or west of St. Louis flooded. We have seen the Ozarks flooded. We have seen Las Vegas flooded. And we have seen even Death Valley get flooded, of all places. These deluges are coming out of the sky in leaps and bounds. Leaps and bounds.
Joe is back in a moment.
leaps and bounds to the degree that the weather is going from one extreme to the other. It's either super, super dry with not enough rain, or whenever it does rain, it's a deluge. And these are all the beginning sorrows that the Bible talks about towards woe be unto the inhabitants here upon to the earth, whenever that you shall see these things start to evolve or start to materialize. I was really touched about the speech a while ago pertaining to Gorbachev, because I knew that it was through those 9 cassette tapes that was sent to the White House in 1988 that, yes, I can prove, that helped to establish that agreement, because up until then it was a Cold War, it was a stalemate, and there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry and turmoil towards not knowing what the Russians was going to do, and of course they didn't know what we was going to do, and it was just a stalemate for the world not to evolve. Well, since that, the world has in fact evolved, but America has taken back seat to the rest of the countries that done the involving, that growed, that intensified. Why is that? I think that that's the reason why that we have basically been slapped in the face, because the Reagan era, the Bush, the Mr. Senior Herbert Bush did not do the proper and right thing pertaining to allowing for biblical Bible prophecy to be promoted in the right way that it should have been promoted in the 80s. That way it would have given the founder of the Windmill Ministries at that time a voice. They didn't want that voice. They didn't want somebody such as myself towards being in charge or over them. So because of it, God has given them over to a reprobate and basically put us where we are today, towards our crime being where it is, all our jails being full. We're $30 trillion in debt. We went to war with the Afghanistan people. That backfired on us, spending over $2 trillion. God only knows that the human casualties that was caused. And 11 days later, our very enemies that we was at war with takes the country back over. Well, this is what happens whenever you turn left, whenever you should have turned right. That has put us where we are today, not only internationally, but has also put us where we are today globally. And I'm really frightened, just like the commentator was talking about a while ago, towards how much damage has happened to our national security, to a major breach in regards towards what Donald Trump has done. Because if it's that easy to go into the White House or the Capitol building or wherever, the CIA files or the Pentagon files, and to grab up all that stuff and drag it down to your own facility, if it's that easy to do that, can you only imagine how our real true enemies have taken advantage of us? You talk about lax, you talk about carelessness, you talk about gross negligence. This goes beyond any of that, as far as I'm concerned, pertaining to what certain individuals allowed for Donald Trump to do. It's not just Donald Trump's fault that this occurred, but it's also other people that was engaged in that type of security that sat back and allowed for Donald Trump to have done this. It's really, really strangely, grossly, scaringly sad.
Our Pennsylvania's Democratic Senate
All right,
candidate.
let's go forward. We don't want to discuss this. I know a lot of times to my viewers, they probably think, was he running for some sort of office?
Dubbed the Safer America Plan, it calls for more funding to recruit and train police, investment in services to address the root causes of crime, and common sense gun measures such as comprehensive background checks and a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. The president called out Republicans for refusing to fund the police in his public safety plan proposed last year.
When it comes to public safety in this nation, the answer is not defund the police, it's fund the police. The point is, we ask so much of you, so much of you. I've not met a cop who likes a bad cop. There's bad in everything. There's lousy senators, there's lousy presidents, there's lousy doctors, there's lousy lawyers. No, I'm serious. But I don't know any police officer that feels good about the fact that there may be a lousy cop. And I'm tired of not giving the kind of help they need. Folks, look, we're in a situation in this country where we have to give them additional resources they need to get their job done. Every single Republican member of Congress, every single one in this state, every single one voted against the support for law enforcement. They talk about how much they love it. They voted against the funding. Flat out. Flat out. Every Republican in the House, every Republican in the Senate, every single one.
Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He is chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. Very good to have you on the show this morning, Congressman. So listening to President Biden.
And I've said this before, it has given the impression of and to the American citizens that these things could possibly actually be being done intentionally to cause a disaster, to cause a calamity, to cause our streets to become corrupted, to basically put us where we are today. It is really, really intensely sad towards what we're having to deal with in comparison to what went on before Ronald Reagan's administration or during his administration.
Hard, to lower costs for better paying jobs and safer communities.
I'm going to go forward for conscientious sake. We're going to go forward again. We're going to go forward. Keep going. Commercial. All right, hang on.
Then Ken...
Back up. Back up. Right. Right. There.
The enduring legacy of the People's Princess.
Hugs to say hello, to congratulate, and at times to comfort. Prince William, Prince Harry and their wives aren't afraid to open their arms and to bare their souls. It's what Princess Diana would have done. The People's Princess, a royal with a common touch.
There isn't a day during the past 2.5 decades where I haven't thought about the mark she left, not only on me and my brother, but on all of our lives.
Diana was just 19 when she agreed to marry Prince Charles, at the time one of the world's most eligible bachelors. Their fairy tale wedding in 1981, a global spectacle. 750 million people tuned in to see the dress, the carriage ride, the kiss on the Buckingham Palace balcony. But away from all the pomp and pageantry, Diana yearned for a normal life, especially for her sons. Back then, Ken Worf was the bodyguard for Princess Diana, Prince William, and Prince Harry.
From day one, she would take them to school. She didn't want them tutored in a room in a palace. She wanted them to be out with their own peer group, going to burger bars and shopping in the street and going to theme parks, because this is exactly what their own friends did.
And exposing them to another side of Britain, taking them to homeless shelters. Prince William wrote about it in June, saying, "I was 11 when I first visited a homeless shelter with my mother, who was determined to shine a light on an overlooked, misunderstood problem." Diana opened the country's first AIDS unit, famously shaking hands with one of the patients, determined to break the stigma of HIV/AIDS, and campaigned against landmines.
Yeah, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world.
All right.
Causes her children still champion today. Prince Harry visiting Angola in his mother's memory 22 years later. And teaming up with a former rugby star earlier this year, encouraging people to get tested for HIV.
What my mum started all those years ago was creating empathy and understanding.
Diana was just 36 when she died, tragically killed in a Paris car crash. The Queen paid tribute in a rare live message from Buckingham Palace.
I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others.
and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death.
Her legacy alive today, especially in her 2 sons, promoting mental health, opening up about their own struggles.
I think when you are bereaved at a very young age, anytime really, but particularly at a young age, I can resonate closely to that. You feel pain like no other pain.
Now, a quarter of a century after her death, Diana's vision of a modern royal family endures.
Her legacy lives on, I think, in the way that the royals now conduct themselves. It's a generational thing. I think the royals are now more touchable than they were in the last century, of course, because of the times that we live in. But that's also the Diana effect.
The Diana effect living on in her sons and their children, and in generations to come.
NBC's Kelly Kobiea with that report. And up next, a look at some of the stories making front page headlines across the country. Morning, Joe.
Let's go back to her real quick.
To come.
Her charisma truly met the criteria of being a true princess. And she did devote so much of her life to the general public. And to think that her life was taken from us the way that it was over an aggressive media fiasco is absolutely sickening to me, that basically her life was intentionally taken by the carelessness of the potsy recording media at that time. She did stand out. She was a special person, and she did care, or at least she acted like she cared about the everyday general old Joes and little Sallys that made her extremely special. Like I told you all ago, I was with my wife. I think it was, I don't know for sure the year, but I think it was in the late 90s is whenever this occurred. That was heartbreaking, to say the least. Very heartbreaking. And to think that we have turned backwards, 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards with society, pertaining to how ugly that various countrymen and various countries have become, is that much more nauseating. That much more nauseating, pertaining to all the gun violence, all the crimes, all the drugs.
And many are afraid they will not be able to financially support themselves and a child. The U.S. birth rate fell 4% in 2020. That is the largest single-year decrease in nearly 50 years, according to a government report. To Arizona, where the Daily Courier has an item on how the average life expectancy in the United States fell by 2.5 years in 2020, one of the sharpest declines in nearly 100 years. That's according to a new provisional data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which stated the COVID-19 pandemic again played a role in the decline. Life expectancy dropped to 76 years in 2021, a loss of nearly 3 years since 2019, Nika.
The Los Angeles Times reports children in California may soon be required to attend kindergarten. This possible move comes after many young students skipped the grade during the pandemic, which sparked learning gap concerns. The state Senate passed an education bill this week which would require all students to complete 1 year of kindergarten before entering the first grade. If signed into law, it would not take effect for 2 years. We'll be watching that. And that does it for us this morning. Jose Diaz-Balart picks up the coverage after a final quick break.
I remember in Chicago, living in Antioch, school had just started, and it was in the middle of the winter, and I had no idea at that time that we was going to be moving come March. I remember going to the Antioch school, and I don't know why, but I was obsessed with toothpaste at the time that children used, and I would eat it almost like eating peanut butter. I don't know why that I was obsessed by doing that. I guess it was the flavoring that it had in it that was attractive to me. But I remember they had a teachers' ed parents conference in that school, and I remember going to that with my mother with me, and the teacher explaining to my mother that I had some disabilities and that I was going to be a slow learner, and that certain techniques was going to have to be used for me to get back to the standards of what the regular students was at that time towards my learning. Of course, at that time, I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't understand what was being said and why it was being said. I just know this, that whenever I come to Tennessee, I basically got thrown out into an atmosphere that was totally foreign to me, pertaining to farming. My mother had to go to work. She worked in a sewing factory. My father farmed during the summer and worked on cars, body work, during the winter. And there never was no special skill type teachers that at that time here in Tennessee could have developed or been devoted in children like me that was a bit not on the upper edge in learning abilities. I think it may have been caused because of either me almost dying as an infant and them taking out a kidney, which was considered very unprecedented or unpopular at that time to be able to operate on an infant, or it was possibly me being almost electrocuted to death while we was living in Round Lake, Illinois. I don't know which one that could have possibly damaged my brain. I don't know if it could have been the chemicals pertaining to them putting me out, pertaining to the operation, or if it could have actually been the electrocution, because I do remember this as a young child. I walked around with the impression of a burnt keys in my right hand that took like a month to heal, and I remember going through about 30-day period in Round Lake before we moved to Antioch of tasting the taste of copper basically in my tongue, especially the lower part of my tongue. So whatever it was that I got a hold of pertaining to electricity, it really rung my bell. And that could, of course, my parents didn't realize how close that I come to actually dying, and it was only by the hand of God that spared my life, that they just didn't realize how harsh or how close that I come to actually dying during that time. Of course, whenever they moved here, it was basically a survival type environment to where if mother didn't work, we wouldn't have seen no Christmases. If mother didn't work, we wouldn't have had insurance. If mother didn't work, we would have done without so many things here in Tennessee. And of course, with us farming, me at the age of 8, 9, 10 years old, driving trucks and driving tractors towards helping on the farm to survive, in addition to running livestock and pigs and all the above, there just never was that opportunity for me to regain my educational learning ability because of the environment of the demands, because of the unskillfulness in sharing elementary school 1 through 8, and because of the harshness pertaining to the abusiveness that was going on in the family pertaining to my father's post-traumatic stress disorder, with him being in the military and him walking away from the Lord and basically becoming very harsh and very mean to his family. The abusiveness that went on during that time of me basically getting my head almost completely slapped off because I misspelled a word, or I couldn't spell a word, or I couldn't remember a word, or I couldn't do my arithmetic just right, or if we spilt a glass of milk accidentally at the table, we got our, what's beat. If we forgot to take out the garbage or collect the bottles, we always collected pop bottles because it was a way to get an extra money. And plus it was a hazard towards pop bottles being all over the property. We just throw them just anywhere, basically, just living like a bunch of heathens at the time. But that environment, whenever I got old enough to understand that it was a wrong environment after my brother had died, that was during the time that I basically said, you know what, this education stuff is for the birds. And that was a regret that I had to live with, because I was basically an 8th grade dropout. Even though I went to Westview, I think I went either halfway through 9th grade or halfway through 10th grade. I don't forgot now which grade it was that I did apply. I know that I was in 9th grade in Westview, but I realized that my potential towards me catching up with the rest of the students, because they wasn't going to throw any type of favoritism my way towards giving me either straight D's and going ahead and sending me from one class to another. They was basically giving me F's. So once I realized what I was up against, I decided, you know what, I'm 15 and a half years old. I'm going to go get a worker's permit. My mother had already agreed to, and I'm going to start working with my hands versus working with my head. Was it hard? Absolutely. Did I make it? I did, but only by the will and the hand of God, because I had some very, very emotional as well as physical challenges to have to go through, especially whenever I fell off the building in 1979, and then in 1983 after the car almost took my life, after me coming back from Texas and coming back from out west in California, living in Thousand Oaks for about 4 or 5 months with my cousin out there. It was just a very, very challenging time for me. And it's just 1,000 wonders that I was strong enough, and God gave me the will, God gave me the desire, God gave me the ability to get back on my feet and basically recreate myself towards becoming a true auto body technician, in tearing automobiles apart and putting them back together again, and working and being self-sustainable for the next 30 plus years. It was only through and by God, the Holy Anointing Spirit, that gave me that drive, that gave me that ability, and me becoming mature enough to start learning different things in the educational department, in which I'm still learning. My spelling is still bad and will probably be bad all of my life. I don't know. I may get smart enough to figure out the spelling of the words towards memorizing all of them. But it was a very, very challenging time for my life. And of course, whenever the 9 tapes went to the White House in 1988, and I got absolutely no support or no recognition for those 9 tapes going to the White House, I knew then that I was up against something that even went beyond my physical handicaps towards me having to basically master or get over. And I had no idea that the problems was going to basically slap me in the face of how severe that this resistance movement was, until after I come back to Tennessee in 2014, which was 8 years ago now, a little over 8 years ago. And my brother and I started building this pole barn with the ideal of me being able to finish out the rest of my remaining life here, and basically creating some sort of a rehabilitating services to the public based around the 3 H's pertaining to helping our veterans as well as people that had desperate needs. I had no idea that this neighborhood was going to rear up the way that it did. And it wasn't just by 1 or 2 families. It was by, I guess, a dozen families in this area that was dead set that they was going to try to make my life so miserable that I packed up and I moved out. That was their whole concept towards wanting to bring all that aggravation and torment and terrorizing our lives the way that it was terrorized, towards they didn't like the fact that I had come back here. Well, why didn't they like the fact that I'd come back here? Because they had already talked about me. They had already planted those seeds of jealousy or hate, despair. Just within arm's distance, I could reach out and go to some of these people that I'm talking about, and they wouldn't even open up the door to even talk to me, much less invite me into their house and offer me a cup of coffee or a glass of tea. That's how bitter that they become in cornering this position before I ever got back here in 2014. And of course, it didn't help none with right up the road here with a castle that they built pertaining to the Wiccans, basically an occult that prays to the creation and don't pray to the creator. That didn't help none towards them being just right up the road here, less than a quarter of a mile. And plus, it didn't help none with various law enforcement bad people, just like the president was talking about. There's good and bad in everything. That these bad people was trying to destroy my life, either in Land Between the Lakes or out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, or right here in the state of Tennessee. And that's basically what occurred in 2005, whenever my wife walked out of my life because of me standing back up for the ministry. And that's whenever ex-chief Moore, David Moore, that used to be the Martin Police Department up there, that's whenever they pulled off a scheme towards, I tell you what, let's do. Since nobody is buying into the fact that he's crazy or that he's mentally insane, let's try to make him out to be a very, very dangerous individual, and let's try to put him in the same category as being a homegrown terrorist. And that's whenever the event happened in my life in 2005, towards them acting like that I was some sort of a terrorist by charging me with falsifying files. I hired a bad representation pertaining to Benjamin Dempsey in Huntington that went ahead and went with that charade towards marking me. I basically plead guilty to the charge and time served and was on probation. But I had no idea that these people were so vindictive. From 2005 leading up to me moving back here in 2014 towards basically the judicial system, letting the founder of the Windmill Ministries down, as well as all the other churches that had bonded together towards banning me from any of their services, towards me even coming as a guest or as a visitor, much less inviting me to actually be on speaking campaigns. And now, 30 plus years later, I can honestly say that because the things has went south the way that they have in regards towards our inflation, in regards towards the rise of gas, in regards towards the loss of all these jobs, in regards towards all these drugs and all these suicides and homicides and rapes and et cetera, I can honestly sit back and say, well, you know what? They brought it up onto themselves. They didn't want to support a ministry that supported peace and utopia, and it couldn't have happened to a better group of people. Just like over in Kenton, Tennessee, they almost didn't even let a dollar store come in there because they're so, I guess the word would be mentally struck to the degree that they don't want no help. They got their bedroom community over there towards everybody getting a check, but yet now whenever somebody comes into that area that wants to do good for that area, and let's say they want to put in a factory or re-renovate one of the other buildings that used to have a factory in it, they all buck up against that and say, no, we're not going to have this. So in the meantime, their youth, their children and their grandchildren and their children's children are suffering because now there's no opportunity towards their children staying around with them. And now if their children doesn't have any type of success, they're going to have to move either to Atlanta or Nashville or Memphis or some other metropolitan area where they got hopes towards being able to survive. They have done it to themselves here in Northwest Tennessee whenever they decided to create this resistance movement that I didn't realize how strong and powerful that it actually was until I moved back to Tennessee in 2014. And that's basically whenever total hell busted out in my life and my brother's life. And my brother David, he was not adjusted to this kind of aggravation and hardship that basically helped to put him in a grave at the age of 51 years old that I guess these people are so fruity and nutty, they're still blaming me because of what that they was doing, coming to either 291 Thompson Road or 430 Beech Grove Road again and again and again. They're still so fruity and so nutty, they're still blaming it on me because I ever come back to begin with. Yeah, I come back to help them. Then it won't help. Drug-induced, alcohol-induced, dim-witted induced, basically a courageousless type society that was dead set that they wasn't going to accept the teachings coming from the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions. So because of it, it has put us now all in the red after 30 some odd years later, and it has regrettably put us where we are today, towards the inflation, towards COVID, towards the war in Ukraine, and now we're beginning to understand that this global phenomenon pertaining to water reservoirs, rivers, drying up is not just happening in one or two areas, but it's happening worldwide, all over the world. Or whenever it does come a major storm, it's a deluge, and it puts, like we're looking at right here, up to 200,000 people without drinking water. That puts them in despair there in Jackson, Mississippi, and I'm pretty sure probably to some extent, I don't know why it hadn't made the headlines, but I'm pretty sure to some extent all that flooding that went on in Dallas, Texas, and around the Dallas, Texas area basically has done the same thing. I know whenever the flooding happened in Waverly, Tennessee last year, it basically depleted a lot of their services and contaminated a lot of their drinking water, even though they had wells. But I'm pretty sure that it's probably done the same thing in other areas too as well. And to be able to look at a country like Afghanistan, where over 1 million structures has been totally wiped out, and over, what was it, 11 or 1,200 people that they know of that's dead right now. I'm pretty sure the body count will go way up. This is all signs of not only the last day scenarios pertaining to the great sorrows, but it is also signs towards what the human activity has done pertaining to not listening to what they should have been listening to 30 plus years ago, but the conglomerates, the big money people, hid it and kept the facts from us, but now they can't because of the internet and social media platform services.
Running clean and safely for the residents, Jose.
Well, Venegas, I thank you so much. And now to some breaking news on the COVID-19 pandemic. Moments ago, the Food and Drug Administration cleared the use of updated booster shots of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, targeting the BA4 and BA5 subvariants of the Omicron variant. So what this means is that people 12 years and older will be able to receive a booster shot of the Pfizer vaccine, and people 18 and older will be able to receive a booster shot of the Moderna vaccine at least 2 months after their most recent dose. Now, the CDC...
See, this hasn't been nothing but a major handicap towards
sign up
towards what people are having to deal with right now pertaining to the COVID, and we think that it's made a lot of our lives uncomfortable here in America, which it has. Don't think for a second that it hadn't. But if you really get to looking at hang on for 1 second. If you really get to looking at some of these other countries, what we're going through here in America is only a drop in the bucket compared to some of these other countries in what COVID has done to their existences.
Russia, as you know, is involved in the attempted destruction of Ukraine. How their relationship could impact the world order. But first, we'll go live to Ukraine, where UN inspectors have just arrived in the city containing the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. We'll dig into how it could impact the war there. You're watching Jose Diaz-Balart Reports.
I'm going to end right there. Walk outside just for briefly a split second right here, and show you something here. So many people wanted to put me personally in the category of not just being crazy, but basically being either a harmful individual that wanted to harm people's lives, or put me in the category towards somebody that was anti-government, anti police, anti this and anti that. That flag right there went down, I believe it was either Monday or Tuesday, because of the death of a state trooper here in the state of Tennessee that wound up being involved in a major helicopter accident while on duty, flying a state trooper helicopter in respect towards his deceased that they have recently just put in the ground because of this. Now, if I'm supposed to be such of a monster or such of a anti-government activist, how come I have American flags, I've got crosses, I've got the Star of David pertaining to the Israel Jerusalem Star? How come I've got so many artifacts out here that basically prove otherwise? Prove otherwise. My brother and I put this cross up in speaking to the general public about the system that had been broken, the broken cross. And of course there's the Jewish star, the Star of David, that most people around here didn't even know what that star was or represented. Most people around here thought that it was disgraceful because I tilted the cross the way that my brother and I did, representing the broken system. They thought that this cross was sacred, and it wasn't the cross that was sacred. It was what happened on the cross that was sacred, pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy. Now let's walk over here real quick. I've had this flag now hanging since around the 4th of July. I'll take it down after Labor Day, because at that point in time, fall festivals will crank in, and usually we have longer and bigger rains. And besides that, whenever winter sets in, it won't be good for flags to be flying, because it's tough on flags in the wintertime. After my brother died here in May the 25th, 2020, I decided to put in honor of his name this memorial on one side pertaining to all the illegitimate deaths that has happened here in America just within the past 30 plus years. And of course that list needs to be added too, because since that event has occurred, there's been other massive casualties that has regrettably happened here in America. And of course the front I put in honor of the 2nd Infantry that my dad was in, pertaining to the U.S. Army, of the 75th anniversary after World War II. Just wanted y'all to see that, those that had never seen it. And going back over here is basically the Purple Heart Memorial that I put up after my brother's death, that I was in the beginning phases towards making while my brother was living, but then I got hindered because of the complications of all the resistances that was happening here in the Weakley County, Obion County, Northwest Tennessee area. God planted me a tree right there that's going to provide good shade to where it won't burn those plants up so bad with those red rocks, in honor of our United States military pertaining to the Purple Heart Memorial. I'm not through with that. I've got some stuff on there right now to kind of slow down some of the heat resistances, but I plan on coming out here later this fall Let's see where this flag is falling. Need to straighten that back out. Anyways, I plan on coming back out here this fall and doing some work out here on this to make it look more attractive, and also to help with the heat that regrettably has been intense this year, and I'm pretty sure that next year will be just as bad, if not worse. This is my old beater car, one happy herd. And one asked me, well, why are you so happy for? Well, this accident actually was not my accident. The young boy that owned the car, he's the one that had the accident, but I'm pretty sure he was happy that he lived through that accident, because as you can see, it was a pretty tough accident to go through. Choose life, not death. 10 Commandments. Spider-Man. And one other thing I wanted to show you real quick. I did plant that tree. I planted that tree this year. This is just basically a farm life type setting, where my grandmother and grandfather, after the Great Depression, 1929, had to go up to Chicago for about 6 or 7, 8 years. And whenever they come back, they purchase this property. But it's obvious that this sign, the Windmill Ministries Missions, in honor or a special tribute to our veterans, American veterans, pertaining to the broken cross. It is a reminder of a reflection upon all the times we've been let down by broken promises unto broken dreams of a better tomorrow for all of us. Broken and shattered emotions that all of us have experienced one time or another. Even Jesus Christ went up into the mountain and looked down onto the city of Jerusalem and said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I have gathered you together as a hen would gather her chicklings, and ye would not listen. The flamboyant question was fostered by Christ in asking, why dost thou stonest thou me? Or why dost thou persecute me, whenever they was persecuting Christ? And of course they said, whenever they had him in chains, after they had scourged him, for a good work we do not scourge you for or persecute you for, but because you have admitted or said that you are Jesus Christ, God's only begotten Son, the Savior of the world, we are persecuting you because we believe that you have committed blasphemy. The next question is, why are people so quick to condemn, to accept, or understand things that are new? The broken cross, the shattered man, Matthew 9:13. Learn what that meant. A special tribute also to Miss Vera Aldell Jackson, born 1904, that passed away in 1993. Now you keep in mind, since 1993, there has been some significant things happen. First of all, in 1993, we had the event happen in Waco. Then in 1995, we had the event happen in Oklahoma, as well as Ruby Ridge, and as well as an individual being falsely accused or charged of having something to do with the terrorism attack that happened down in Atlanta, Georgia, pertaining to the Olympics that was going on during that time. I think it was during the Olympics. But there's been some more intense moments that has occurred with terrorist attacks upon two American vessels. The Twin Towers was attacked in 1995 during the time that 1993, during the time that the Waco incident was occurring, leading into the events that occurred in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in 1995. And there's just been an event after event after event, including 9/11, including COVID, including the things that we are experiencing right now presently with the high inflation and possibly all these water reservoirs drying up all of a sudden, as well as countries like Ukraine not being able to embark up into their agriculture community in raising wheat. I didn't realize that Ukraine raises basically a third of the wheat throughout the world. And of course, whenever the war flared up, it brought not only the gas prices up, it brought not only the wheat prices up, but it also brought the fertilizer prices up, which made a burdensome time for the farming community to be able to put in their crops this year, that I don't even know if a lot of them is going to be able to come out on top this year towards breaking even, much less being able to go out and buy a lot more equipment and advance themselves in a way. Hang on a minute. Turn this off. Towards advancing themselves in a lot of equipment, better equipment, because of the situation that has recently occurred. And to be quite honest with you, it makes me sick. It's a sickening feeling pertaining to all this that has occurred, pertaining to the adults, the grown-ups, the baby boomers that once more decided that they wasn't going to have an individual such as myself in ministering to them pertaining to end-time biblical Bible events, in giving out warnings and advisories of electrical disturbances and a bloody road ahead and times getting hard. Basically nailing the fact that the president election did rightfully belong to the Democrats versus the Republicans. But now, since I've seen and had this dream, and realizing the significance of this dream, I felt like that it was really, really, really important that I made this particular video, which will be part 2 of the first video, in regards towards explaining my story the best way that I know to explain it to the general public, pertaining to the do's and the don'ts, pertaining to the woes, and pertaining to the sorrows that the elder society, the boomers, have brought upon to the rest of us. There is no other answer other than the answer of the Lord Jesus Christ towards people going back to the cross and getting their lives in order, because it says very, very specifically that he has not found our works perfect yet. But as this particular situation continues to grow of what's going on in that plant, I tend to want to think that it may have already reached a point of no return. And like I said a while ago, if that plant does happen to blow up or burn down or melt down or whatever word terminology that they want to use, I just about guarantee you the Russians are going to blame the Americans, because it was the Americans that helped supply the Ukrainians over a David and Goliath type scenario. The fact that we was willing to give them the proper tools that maybe they could win over their independence again, even though they got a maniac over there, Poisonous Putin, that thinks that he got cheated or that they got the raw end of the deal pertaining to what went on with Gorbachev during the Ronald Reagan's and the Bush administrations. So there's been a lot of stuff that has occurred and that is still occurring, that if we're not smart enough to turn it around and to go the opposite direction, these things are only going to fester, and they're going to get worse, regardless whether it be the intensity of countries, or the intensity of flooding, or the intensity of massive moisture being evaporated from the planet Earth, in which I still believe that it has just as much to do with what we're doing to the actual Earth below our feet as it does the atmosphere itself that's drawing the moisture from the Earth. Between the two, it has created a perfect storm towards the things that are happening right now in regards towards it being super, super dry and hot, or super, super wet pertaining to flooding. That's where we stand. In today's society, in the last day of August 2022. We have September tomorrow, the beginning phases of a new month. And of course, keep in mind it was on September the 11th whenever we got illegitimately attacked by obviously a group of people that was trying to vindicate themselves over that in which what had occurred pertaining to Desert Storm and Desert Shield. All these dots line up. We know for a fact through various intellect communications pertaining to the FBI that the people that actually financed 9/11 was not Afghanistan's, but it was the Saudi Arabians. And I realized that the Americans have got a lot invested in Saudi Arabia pertaining to the oil market, etc., etc., etc. But two wrongs don't make a right. And whenever you're talking about a group of people that has brought this type of illegitimacy to the world, not only in the form of 9/11, but in all the other bad events, including the pandemic, and including what's going on over in Russia, including the floods and the famines, it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And I realize I sound like the bad news barrier, but once more, the people that should be shamed, the people that should be ridiculed, the people that should be degraded, are the people that took advantage of this situation going 30 plus years back, that has now fed their pockets full, that have become successful in their enterprises towards paying for their homes, paying for their cars, paying for their children's education, even though that blowed up in their faces, basically living out the rest of their remaining golden years in a very, very pleasant form, while others is suffering and doing without. This is where we are as an Americans, and this is where we are pertaining to the global world stance. It breaks my heart to know, out of selfishness and greed coming from the petroleum manufacturers pertaining to the petroleum tycoons, conglomerates, that they have put not only America in this type of situation, but they have put the world in this situation. It really, really upsets me, and it breaks my heart. I'm glad yesterday, in ending of what I want to say here to my audience, I'm glad yesterday that I got a chance to go to Jackson, Tennessee and visit Collision Specialists, the people that I worked for give or take almost 10 years, right at 10 years. Mr. Steve Hardy was not there. I didn't get an opportunity to see him. I did have an opportunity to go to the Honda place, and I did have an opportunity to eat at the barn, Brooksy Barn, there before I come home. I got home fairly late. And I did have an opportunity to purchase some of the items that I brought forth in the early part of this part one videoing, this documentation that I put out today. I did have an opportunity to do several different things, in which I'm glad that I got to do them, and I'm glad that I got what I got, and I'm glad that I got to see some of the people that to this day is still working at Collision Specialists, which actually speaks volumes about that particular facility. They got one there that's been working there for 30 years, and one just right under 30 years. I mean, that speaks a lot for a company whenever you can maintain people working there for 30 plus years. It speaks volumes. I'm proud that I was a part of Steve Hardy's life in helping him to become as successful as what he is, not just with the auto body collision industry, but also in other things that he's involved in. I don't know if he is, appreciative towards the people that has helped him throughout his life towards getting to where he is today. I'm pretty sure that he is, but I don't know. I just know this, that there are certain people around here that if I was to knock on their door, rather than them being polite and generous and gracious, rather than showing me hospitality, they would actually show me their hostility. Because once more, they're still trying to blame me for their failures. Like I could go to Kenton, Tennessee right now and go to Terry Neal's house and knock on his door, and he would basically shut the door in front of my face. If I was to go down to Terry Neal's worshiping center, there in between on Highway 45, in between Kenton, Tennessee and Union City, Tennessee, just inside basically where the school zone is, there on Highway 45, 45W, I just imagined that I would be asked to leave, or they would possibly just call the police on me and have me escorted out of that particular facility, and they would give me a warning that I wasn't welcome there. And for Christian people to act this way, whenever I sent Terry Neal 3 letters while I was in Hopkinsville, Kentucky jail, because of the things that Trigg County had done to me, to think that a minister would not even answer a letter, much less 3 letters, after me dedicating my time to him in this area, as well as me dedicating about 1.5 years of my life with his father and the rest of his sisters and family members. And to think that I get this type of appreciation or this type of respect goes beyond comprehension towards why do I want enemies. If these are supposed to be friends, why do I want enemies if friends is going to treat you the way that I'm being treated? In other words, I don't need this type of friendship if this is the way that they're going to show their friendship towards me. Once more, they're two-faced. They're hypocrites. They still have not acknowledged the wrong that has been done here for the past 30 plus years. And, even though I may not see them do this in this lifetime, I guarantee you in the lifetime to come, they're going to give an account for the things that has occurred in this great nation that has put this great nation where we are today. I'm going to end this by what they're saying here pertaining to this particular event that happened in Russia. Thank you for listening.
It was, of course, in power when the USSR's mishandling of the Chernobyl disaster in 1986 caused so much death and so many problems. Gorbachev did see the end of the Soviet Union and the evolution away from Marxism in that country after growing up a committed communist during World War II. Of course, Russia and Soviet Union involved in proxy wars throughout the world, in Africa, in Central America, causing tens of thousands of deaths. He later won a Nobel Peace Prize for ending the Cold War decades later. Still ahead, temperatures set to climb into the 100s for days as California braces for a massive heat wave. But first, today is Overdose Awareness Day.
Overdose Awareness Day.
Making a big push to fight fentanyl. What does that look like? I'll ask a key official leading the response next.
Fentanyl that's coming over the border down on Mexico by the groves. The drug culture that has imitated our great nation. That the president before Gorbachev, I think it was Brezhnev or the other one before him, that said we will take America over and never fire a shot. Well, we've been taken over, friends. We've been taken over by drugs. We've been taken over by sorcery. We've been taken over by ungodliness. We've been taken over by greed. We've been taken over by corruption. We've been taken over by the wicked hand of the devil. And it's time that America stood up pertaining to the true Christians and said enough is enough, and we're taking back everything that got taken from us. Everything that got stolen from us during the past 30 plus years, while a great deal of these people was raking it in, while I sat back and watched them grow and intensify in strength, have a worn out house to a brand new house, to a old beater car to a brand new car. In which, don't get me wrong, I envy anybody that prospers and that gets ahead of that type of lifestyle, because that's what America is all about to begin with. But whenever they do it on the backs of others by taking from that in which what they shouldn't have taken, then I'm against thievery and thieves that did not rightfully give a place to the founder of the Windmill Ministries while they were steadily growing, poking their money back, and getting wealthier and more powerful. That's the part that I despise, and that's the part that one day, regardless whether it be the Neals or whoever, either over in Kenton, in Obion County or Weakley County or Northwest Tennessee, or the people up in Kentucky, in Land Between the Lakes, or the people out in Oklahoma, those are the people that's going to give an account one day for what they done to the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, or those that didn't do what they should have done, that they know that they should have done, that even to this day are still not doing it, pertaining to making amends and making it right. Thank you for listening. Good luck to each and every one of us as we end our program all the time by saying God bless America, God bless America's endeavors. We want to thank you for your time. We want to thank you for your patience. And we want to say shalom. And God bless America, and God bless our troops.